Always very interesting to hear how the industry is coming together, like I said, and I think what's very important for us now is to make sure we get some panelists on stage and see how we can talk about commercial viability. So I would like to ask my colleagues to join. If I can have Andy, George, Melhem, Nader, Sharif, and Tapan to join me on stage, and I'll get them all to introduce themselves to you as we are opening the first session. Tapan, can I start with you, Tapan, to introduce yourself? We'll quickly go around so everyone knows who's on the panel and who's on stage.
Thank you, Naeem. Tapan Vaidya. I'm the CEO for Papa John's Pizza in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Soon we shall open in Jordan.
Hi, I'm Sharif al-Sharif. I'm the Managing Director for Al Ayan Food in the Middle East and North Africa. And we're not planning to expand at this time further.
Hello, my name is Nader Bassett. I'm the CEO of Wakira Investments, Kulsha King, Namnam Asia, El Greco, Ghinwa, and Oliva in the UAE. And I'm also the chairman of NAB Group, which is the multi-operator for Subway in Egypt exclusively.
My name is George Kunnapalli. I'm the managing director for Nando's in the UAE. We are celebrating 20 years this year, and I'm delighted to be here.
Good morning. I'm Andy Holman, until recently the chief executive officer for Ethos, where I remain as a board advisor, but also the founder of Advanced Restaurant Consultants.
Good morning. I'm Melhem Hamdan, CEO of Al Bidayah Holding F&B Group. I represent few brands including Dunkin' in UAE and Kuwait, food production, manufacturing facilities, and the new cloud kitchen concept.
Amazing. Help me in welcoming everyone on stage, please. Again, we're starting up, we're talking about commercial viability, and as you have heard, we have global presence on the stage representing a lot of the sectors of the industry, and obviously what we're facing globally today on multiple levels, be it stability, be it productivity, be it pricing of goods and so forth, we're having some issues. So whilst the business is still solid, remains very strong top line, we're facing a lot of increases. So what I'd like to do is, if I may start with you, Andy, creating value, creating a commercially business model, and that's really the core of our discussion today. What are the 4 top lines that you always keep reminding the team as a CEO of an organization to make sure that the business is well looked after, the customers are well looked after, commercials and business stakeholders are happy with what's happening, and last but not least, growth? 4.
Just 4. Look, I think the foundation of every ultimately successful business is clarity. The point is that everybody, as they start a business, has a central idea as to what it is that's going to make this business be successful, whether it's the product, whether it's a mixture of just the product and the service. And as the challenging times come, I think it's really essential that the entire enterprise really understands what was important at the start, and that whatever cost pressures, and I think there's more than 4, right? I mean, but as the key ones, labor, food costs, landlords, and nowadays delivery. I mean, it's such an integral part of everything that we do. That they start to be put pressure on the industry. That we all come back to a conversation around what was it that we originally set out? What is it that's really important? Why is it the customer's coming to us? And do wherever we can to protect that. And then look around the rest of the P&L, look around the rest of the enterprise. What can we now, pull away from, or what can we leave because it isn't, if you like, mission critical? And I think, from a tangible perspective, certainly food cost inflation is absolutely one of the biggest challenges. And the temptation to change recipes unnecessarily is probably the biggest thing that as a CEO you need to be the guardian of. Price decisions is obviously inevitable, but sitting in the chair and saying, no, we're not going to go off and resize the patty, we're not going to go off and resize the portion because it's, if it's worth it, we've got to find a way to find the savings elsewhere. So I don't know if that's sort of the four, but to me that would be the number one.
It's a good start. Thank you, Andy. Tapan, how do you see it? Again, with multiple locations across the globe, every city, every country brings different challenges to commercial viability.
Yeah, absolutely it does. I actually think for a concept to travel, it's pretty much similar to how one would travel. When you travel, you plan. When you travel, you pack clothes that you might need in an environment with different weather. So you need to basically adapt to what the destination may require and then dress your concept up accordingly and roll it out. I mean, I'd like to talk about, if you don't mind, Taco Bell. Taco Bell in the early 80s was pretty much a regional chain based in Southern California. In fact, people found it difficult to pronounce the word taco. They used to call it taco. And that's when PepsiCo, in '84, PepsiCo, who were the owners at the time, they recruited John Martin, a visionary CEO. And he changed the whole game for Taco Bell. I've got some numbers. What he did was streamlined kitchen operations, adding drive-through windows, and introduced 59-cent tacos. He transformed the company from a $600 million regional chain to a $5 billion national chain through the 80s and 90s. And I'm talking about $5 billion of the 90s. So in '89, Martin introduced a concept called K- for the Taco Bell kitchens. He designed an assembly line production in the kitchen and brought down labor costs. He started supplying all the raw ingredients from a central facility all over the nation. And finally, slashed the price of a taco by almost half to 59 cents. 2 years later, he introduced a 59, 79, 99 range, and Taco Bell had no problem traveling across the US, and it became what it is today. The problem, though, is, and this is the enigma, Taco Bell, unfortunately, while so successful in the US, has failed to travel abroad. Go figure.
Thank you, Tapan. I think on a lighter note, you and I have to be careful telling these stories because we're giving our ages away. Nader, I'm going to move across to you. And again, I still want to talk about the same question that I'm raising about cost adjustment, understanding, be it payroll, be it cost of goods, be it logistics. How do you adjust to a local market when you start these brands, these amazing powerhouses traveling? How do you maintain what the brand has to offer and make sure commercial viability is in place?
Well, I think I was lucky enough to wear both hats, the hat of the brand owner and the hat of the franchisee in 3 different markets. So when it comes to the UAE and KSA, we own our own brands, and we have to face the challenges, whether related to cost or the reasons behind that cost inflation. If you want to improve on your quality, improve on your people, improve on your systems, or simply inflation of the raw material, inflation of the admin fees or taxes in other countries. And then in Egypt, where we represent Subway, so we are instructed by the franchisor on the do's and don'ts and on how to be better, how to improve, and how to grow faster. I would say 3 things would make a difference. The first one is data, 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 data. So you need to be aware of what's happening around you every single day, at most every single week, because things are changing very fast, whether from the inflation side or from the regulation side. The second thing that you need to have is to have the right teams around you. because teams will be those who will be able to understand the changes, the dynamics that are evolving in the market, and then they'll be able to suggest what should be done and take action towards that. And I always think that you hire smart people for them to tell you what to do, not for you to tell them what to do, because otherwise don't hire people, just hire computers. So that's the second thing, so it's teams. And the third thing is absolute discipline. We should be always thinking of every dollar we have as the very last dollar you have. If this was the last dollar you have, if this was the last person you have, the last store you have, the last van you have, what would you do with it? If you have this, if you adopt this mentality, you should be okay. Because with what's happening now in the markets, and it's not only in the UAE, Saudi, and Egypt alike, the wave is just changing and evolving, and it's a roller coaster of good news, less good news, less good news, and you have to adapt, otherwise you will disappear very fast.
Thank you. Sharif, we heard data. How do you utilize data when it comes to your respective brands, your respective territories, in order to make sure that data is a very big word, as we all well know. How do you translate that data into a working capital, a working force, and a commercially viable institution?
I fully agree with you that data is key here. And without data, to be honest, we're lost. And this is the mistake of so many companies, and at different times. We just get so involved into our problems, and we start losing track of what should we look for and when to look for it. And this is major. And data does not only come from our own companies, but it comes also from hiring the right consultants and getting the right third parties to help you on that. Now, when it comes to data, it's very important that you decide what are your top priorities and what you need to look at. Is it food cost? Is it supply chain? Is it your operation excellence reviews and numbers? And end of the day, you need to figure out how can you work on all of them together at the same time in a very specific agility and flexibility. And both colleagues here said great things that I don't want to repeat, but the only two words that I would add on those is flexibility and agility. Is how fast you can take a decision and how flexible you can be in taking your decisions in order to actually reach. And there is no problem sometimes to do mistakes. The greatest advice that we always go for is just do a mistake, learn from it, and move forward. Don't sit and cry about it a lot of time, and don't sit and regret it for a lot of time. We just learn from our mistakes and go. So data is, in my opinion, key. Without it, we cannot move. And it is a lot of time forgotten. We get so engaged in our operation day to day, and we forget about it. And no, it is very important, but it is important to look at it from all aspects, from an organizational point of view, from the customer point of view, and from the shareholders' point of view as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Malhem, again, a couple of points that I pick up, agility and flexibility. Now, when you have a brand that you fully own, you have ultimate control of what to do, when to start, when to finish, adjust, amend, and be as nimble and as agile as you want to be. Nonetheless, when you have someone else's brand that you are operating, how much flexibility and agility can you apply to someone else's brand without doing damage, but to enhance the business and be commercially astute?
I think the quick answer to that is it depends on the relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. If you have an excellent relationship, then you can agree on flexibility on certain matters. In our case, I mean, we have a Dunkin' business that sells donuts and coffee. It's a simple business. For us, we are here to spread happiness, whether it's a 3-year-old having a donut or me and you grabbing coffee along the way to the convention. So for us, we look at it as a simple business. And we always have that flexibility with the franchisor because we have an excellent relationship with them. I mean, my fellow panelists touched on all points, so I'm not going to repeat that. I agree with all of that. But something specific to us, I think challenges led us to start thinking creatively on different aspects. whether it was COVID a few years back or what's happening today. So supply chain, inflation led us to rethink how we do businesses and be more creative. So when it comes to supply chain, we started focusing on local players. And this comes back to the fact that everyone in the market and suppliers and everyone in this industry, we can work together to solve issues. So we worked a lot with suppliers. We tackled lots of inflation and price issues. And at the same time, customers are our, they are the objective. This is why we come to work every day. It's to serve our customers, and we made sure that we still deliver the best product to the customers without going all out and transferring the inflation and price increases. So yeah, that's it in short.
Thank you, Malham. You know, the danger for a moderator like myself today is when you have such a strong panel, they're all addressing all the questions. They're stealing the limelight. Every time that I ask someone a question, I'm getting 10 answers. So I'm looking at the clock saying, what else am I going to talk about? But don't worry, we have a lot to talk about. George, back to you. I want to circle back and talk about that whole flexibility aspect. When you have a fiery brand like Nando's, how much freedom is there? And how much freedom do you give your other parties in order to play with the brand as well?
So at Nando's, we are pretty clear that the brand is all about flame grilled peri peri chicken, and globally we are true to the core menu offering. In terms of flexibility, you would have seen that there are certain items on the menu that you would only find in this part of the world, but they all have a peri peri twist to it. So we have hummus on the menu, or we have halloumi cheese on the menu, but it's always got a slight twist. But the core menu stays the same across the world. And I personally think that if you're picking up a franchise, you're picking it up because across the world it has resonance. If you're going to dilute it so much to suit a particular audience, then you might as well develop your own concept. So in terms of flexibility, we wouldn't want that, and we are happy with the fact that there are clear guidelines and SOPs and recipes for our entire menu offering. Now, there might be markets where the brand may not work because it's spicy, it's chicken. So people always ask me, would you have lamb on your menu, or why can't you do fish? Because peri peri fish should work, especially in this part of the world. But we are a chicken restaurant, and we constantly have these discussions with our brand founders, and they're like, we do chicken and we do it very well, and we'd like to stick to our core competence. And that's how I see a franchise or relationship. We are signing a brand because we believe in what they're offering. Diluting it beyond a certain point would defeat the purpose.
Look, it's very wise words, because I think a lot of people actually acquire a franchise and then they wish to amend the franchise to suit their business model rather than what they've invested in. So I think a lot of the times it's how do you scale them back and how do you control that procedure? Which brings me to my next question that I'm going to ask you, Sharif, to help me out on some answers here. Legal frameworks. You know, we again, in every country we have a different approach. We're blessed here. We have a country that is young, that is hungry to facilitate a lot. There is a massive demand. The industry contributes a double-digit towards the economy as well, from a percentage perspective. But are we getting enough support globally on the legal framework? You know, take payroll, take visas, take travel, take exposure across that. How do you see it across your establishments?
That's a very vast question, actually, because it takes you from 0 to 100. In some markets, without mentioning any names, it's very easy to find people and to recruit people, get them from all over the world, have all the legalities framed by the government, or majority of it, or the main points of it. While in other markets, it's become extremely difficult to do so. And in between being difficult and non-difficult becomes the part of nationalization, where countries enforce for you to use the local workforce rather than bringing from the outside. And therefore, I think the legality between the company and any other entity becomes minor to compare with what's the enforcement of the law of each company, of each country is necessitating for us to follow. So in all cases, we have to operate. Labor becomes a challenge sometimes, but end of the day, all markets are working. There is labor eventually. I think one of the challenge after finalizing what comes with legal or not is how the company, again, is willing to operate and is willing to create the right environment for the right people so they can all be happy. And this is one of the main topics or the main necessities in a company is how to make your employees happy and enjoying their job. And I guess this is where it all lies down to.
Thanks very much. George, again, back to you, if I may. On the same topic, legal framework, obviously we've spoken about the recruitment chapter and the human capital to a certain level. I want to talk more about the trade licenses, the obligations that are there as a necessity in order to operate, and how are they different in various parts of the world? How easy is it to operate our industry across the globe from your perspective?
So my mandate is UAE. So we have stores in Abu Dhabi and Al Ain and Dubai, Sharjah and Ras Al Khaimah. So every store needs a trade license, and the activities that cover for at least casual dining is restaurants, coffee shop, and catering, which covers your dine-in, takeaway, and delivery business. And even for a dark kitchen, you need the same license. And currently, the model is the 5149 model. So as an expat-owned business, we are in the 5949 model, and we haven't had any difficulties because we are purely a UAE-based business. I have heard from franchise partners in other countries that it's not always the same case. Here, we barely take a few hours to get a trade license, and you get going, whether it's your labor visa quotas or whether it's your additional activities or extended trading hours. We have never had any problems in the last 20 years. And I can say that even as of a couple of weeks ago, we picked up a license for Al Ain, and a couple of months ago in Dubai, and it's been smooth sailing.
Thanks very much, George. Andy, if I may, legal framework, whilst we're on the topic, how difficult is it to make sure that new entry to markets is well understood before you enter? We see a lot of people coming into this market, going abroad, without having their homework done. What experiences can you share with everyone?
Well, I think the number one consideration if you're attempting to enter into a new market is confidence that the business and the rules are clear and mature. Where there is uncertainty, where a business isn't able to predict, whether these things are going to be in place a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, it becomes a little bit more problematic. And generally speaking, the mature countries tend to have a slightly more mature and organized framework. Having said that, there are clearly some caveats. Being a UK sort of citizen and looking at the chaos that has to some degree unfolded in the last 3 years there, with what was, particularly in our industry, a very robust and very profitable environment, the rules changed. I mean, not just on a small base, but across the European as Brexit occurred. And as we can see now, 4 years, 5 years down the line, the consequences of that are dramatic. And it's not just that governmentally there was a referendum, but on a day-to-day basis, the nature of the employee base disappeared. So operators in that environment and investors in that environment are now having to think very differently. Right? We thought it was a mature market with a very, established understanding, but it's thrown a huge uncertainty into what's the way to navigate that. I think that where you're moving into a country that's got, if you like, unstructured rules, it provides some opportunity. If the market is really immature and is going to change on a whim, then you can necessarily price that in. Right? I think that's not a major issue. But really, it's all about consistency and clarity. The easier it is to understand the rules, businesses can work around them. The problem comes when there's change.
Thanks, Andy. Tapan, 77 stores, if my memory serves me right. How are you cutting across these legal frameworks with regards to recruitment. We know what's happening from a salary scale. We know what's happening from an influx. We know the changes in the visa processes as well. So how do you see all of that?
Yes, you're right. 77 and 7 Emirates. So, and so briefly to touch upon what George was saying, yes, it is clearly the process is convenient to get the licenses. Yes, some Emirates take longer than the others, but largely it's stress-free. Recruitment is a challenge, and I think it'll continue to remain a challenge with locally recruited labor. This has been my experience, that when you recruit locally, these employees tend to leave you faster than if you recruited from source countries. And time and again, all my years in the industry, in this region, this has been the story. So I would always advise people, if you can, please recruit from source. Those employees tend to be more loyal and stay with you longer.
Thanks very much, Shell. I'm going to move and we'll start talking about how do you enlarge your share of the cake into a market that is growing ever so rapidly. We have a lot of artificial intelligence that's entering our space. We have a lot of aggregators that are trying to be part of the success story. We have a lot of new aspects constantly introduced to our business sphere. And if we're not fast enough, we seem to be left behind. Delivery, takeaway, aggregators, all of that. Is it a necessity for our business or is it a nice to have? May I start with you, Malham?
I mean, it's these days it's a necessity, obviously. So, and again, I want to go back to the fact that for us, challenges were good. They did us good. So when we had the pandemic, as Dunkin' business, we used to do delivery in single digits. Post-pandemic, we jumped to 25% delivery business. So before and after, now delivery is a necessity. As a model, we look at obviously takeaway, dine-in, and delivery, and all these aspects for a business. And yeah, I'm not sure if also you had the question on data related to that, but today, I don't want to say we're late in the game, but we're focusing more on analyzing data and looking at data closely, and this also helped us with what's happening in the market. So today, we looked at store-by-store performance, COGS metrics that helped us to be creative, maintaining that cost and not, again, pushing the price increases to the consumer. So definitely, it's not good to have. It's a necessity. I mean, this is how everyone is moving these days.
Nader, are you in agreement?
Absolutely, yeah. How can I not agree with Malham? Do you want me to comment on it?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think restaurants, we should not forget, it's part of the hospitality ecosystem. And by hospitality means social interaction, serving consumers wherever they are and however they please. That's hospitality. So if consumers want us to deliver, we'll have to deliver. Now, how much, how consistent, and how sustainable, still to be discussed, and I don't think this is the discussion point today, because otherwise it will take us probably...
Can you clap, please?
But other than the fact that delivery is a necessity, of course, because consumers want delivery, and we got used to being pampered and got lazy, into everything being delivered to our doorstep. But we should not turn a blind eye to the fact that restaurants are essentially diners. It's dine-in. It's people who want to go out, meet, see others, enjoy, consume, interact with the waiters or a machine, but just go out and be somewhere. So we should not forget and omit the interest and the importance of actually providing the service and the hospitality that we are required to provide. If a restaurant focuses on this and balancing it out between dine-in and deliveries, it should survive. But if a restaurant quickly slips into having a brick and mortar, having waiters, having the hospitality ecosystem, but having 90% in delivery, I think it will disappear in less than 1 year. So it's either you are a restaurant, and in this case, you have to balance out the delivery and the dine-in, and have more dine-in than delivery, hopefully, to absorb your cost, or be a cloud kitchen and just do deliveries. And in this case, your cost structure and ecosystem will be completely different.
It's a deep and meaningful topic, and I certainly don't wish to go there, not on this panel. When it comes to landlords and aggregators, we pre-agreed that we won't talk about them today, not on this panel. Otherwise, we'll hijack the entire session, the entire day, as a matter of fact. Going back to commercial viability, how does market maturity help us or enable us to excel in our business? Tapan.
Market maturity is, of course, very important. Although, from my personal experience standpoint, I think all markets around the world are mature for a product like a pizza. But yeah, new products, new cuisine, fusion, these things, yes, you need maturity in the market for such concept to proliferate. But as far as pizza is concerned, it's just such a ubiquitous product. People of all ages love this product, and so we are doing very well.
Thank you. George, market maturity is, for me, has multiple facets. One is the market is well aware of your brand and they attune to it. Two is a lot more competition. Three, market inflation happens. So how do you tackle all of these to work in favor of a dominant brand like Nando's?
So for us, when we come into a market, we are already aware of the fact that chicken is universal and spicy chicken is welcome, especially when you have different flavor profiles. But we also are cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of other flame grilled chicken players at different price points, whether they are dine-in focused or delivery focused. So to stay on top of the game, one is your brand equity. How are you performing around the world? Because UAE, especially Dubai, being a melting pot where you have close to 150, 170 nationalities. So people are widely traveled. What they find successful and aspirational in another part of the world definitely attracts traction in this part of the world. So when Nando's came into the UAE, we were already aware that it's doing phenomenally well in its parent market and in other markets where it had gone in. And there was an ask, when is it coming in, when is it coming in? It's something like how probably Cheesecake Factory was. People were waiting for the brand to come in and open. So you start from a certain point of maturity in terms of attracting traffic from day one. Then how do we stay on top of the game? Obviously, we have a head start. If you look at today, the flame grilled chicken market in the UAE, we are quite ahead of the curve in terms of our locations, in terms of our teams, in terms of the product offering, the menu mix, the business conversion rate on many performance metrics. To stay there, we need to be consistent in offering the product, customer service, and in anticipating changes. Like when we launched the Espetada Ettore, which is like an XL version of the Espetada, we launched it during the pandemic when everybody thought value meals was in play. But we launched something at 170 or 180 dirhams, and we offered it as a sharing option, and people took to it. So how do we anticipate how consumer behavior in our market is evolving? And that comes back to data. We track data not just on our sales mixes and top line, but on every element of our P&L. So store-wise, meal session-wise, we know what's going on and what's moving and what's not, and what needs to be less focused on and what needs to be pushed. So I think it's very important.
In my mind, at least, maturity of any market opens up a lot of opportunities. For me, it's about making sure that we start the innovation cycle and we start the homegrown brands, and that in itself translates into the economy being active and alive. Sharif, I can see you Etching to answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to not disagree, but to have a different thought on that. There is nothing called market to mature, but there are brands that age. I've witnessed in 1994, and sorry to highlight how old I am and how everybody is old, but
It's mileage, not age.
Yes. So when McDonald's came into the market in 1994 in the GCC, and at the time I was working with KFC, and we really panicked. The entire company panicked, and we said, okay, now market is going to shrink. What are we going to do? And then with time, we learned a few things. Number one, we learned that when more brands come in, the expanding and the spending power of the consumer grows. Something we never thought of. We thought that the market would mature, but it was actually growing with you. The second thing is that you need to find new opportunities to grow with the markets, and there need to make sure that your brand is evolving. And the one advice that I learned in my life is that brands are human beings. They exercise, they eat well, you take care of them, they actually stay healthy, and they grow with you, and they continue with you. But if you don't take care of them, if you don't remodel your assets, if you don't innovate in your menu, if you don't take care of your people and let them go and be relevant to the type of consumers that they're facing, because we are here looking at the brand, but our consumers are actually, since the 90s until now, are 3 different generations. And now generation span is actually getting younger. So this generation would take 20 years before. Now every 10 years we have a new generation. And this is one thing I wanted just to mention, is that mature markets are great, but it's all about our brands and how we don't let them age. We let them grow with the markets, and markets will keep growing. That they will never be mature, in my opinion. Maturity can come in the sense of how they operate. But in terms of size and our own growth, they will never mature. They're always a great opportunity to mature. Thank you.
Look, I couldn't agree anymore, and I think more importantly, it's market relevance. And how do you keep a brand alive as the market evolves and matures? How do you keep a brand relevant to the audience and the demographics? Tapan, I can see you.
No, I was about to say exactly the same, that actually the truth is somewhere in the middle, where market continues to evolve and mature, and the brands continue to age. So you need to look after, but obviously you cannot quite control the market's evolution. What you can control is what you said, keep your brand healthy, keep it reinvigorated so that it deals with the evolving market.
Andy, maturity to your brands, what does it mean?
Well, look, I think Sharif captured it really well. Every case study will show you brands that have been able to sustain over 50, 60, 70 years, and in the food, that's relatively few, have been able to do that. Go back, revisit what it is that they did at the beginning, and recognize that there's a whole demographic shift, right? So the people who grew up with the brand when they were 18 are still consuming at 50 and 60, and new entrants arrive. And so it's not necessarily about the market maturity, as the demographics need to be given a reason to engage with the brand at their particular time of life. And that happens in different ways. So, I mean, the QSR category, I think McDonald's are a great example. One thing they did as they arrived, they pretty much in the region, drive-through. That was their big double down. And people then started to follow that. And now you're starting to see, I think, that absolutely helped the driving population. And then, I mean, Americana fronted the other end of it, kids' play areas. For ages, that was in recognition. If you don't have, particularly in Saudi, a place for the family to go, then you're just not going to be relevant, even though you've got a great channel available through drive-through. So a good brand will have that mindfulness. We are, from whatever age we start, all the way through to the end. And they have different requirements. So the maturity can be, one, organic. How many stores can we build? How many other new players are we going to try to protect against? But much more, what are we trying to do with the accessibility to people? And I agree with you. I don't think markets do mature per se. They either stay relevant or they don't, and then they die.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. When you don't own a brand, how do you encourage the ownership of the brand to evolve, particularly when they're operating across the globe in many markets, and every market is at different level? And I'll take your point about the children playground area. Right? How do you get that across into ownership of brands to say we need that shift because my market demographics are based on A, B, C, D? And again, in fairness to the brand owners, why should they entrust an owner who only sees that market to change their brand? So it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario.
Well, I mean, it speaks, I think, more to the relationship that you have with the franchisor, franchisee, if that's the particular reference you're making. But ultimately, it comes down to the commercial sense. If a franchisor is saying you can't do that because, and is just unwilling to listen to the data, the facts, and the commercial case, then a franchisee would be well within their rights to think this relationship is not going to be productive. Ironically, it seems when you look at the big franchise systems around the world, the most important innovations they've made have actually come as a consequence of franchisees saying, this is really powerful, it's something which we think can work. Franchisors being able to take it on board, and then it's being more value creation for other systems. But ultimately, it comes down to common sense, right? If it doesn't fit in one part of the world, then fine. There's a reason for that. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be allowed somewhere else.
Melhem, what do you think?
I mean, again, in our case, we have a strong relationship with the franchisor, but then it's a learning curve, right? And it's a two-way street. So from one side, we have Ramadan. We're preparing for Ramadan, so the brand wouldn't tell you what to do in Ramadan. But then we capture a 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. category of people fasting, and they want to consume food. And this is us, we're the local experts. We've been here for 25 years. From the brand's perspective, they would say, you know what, you're doing a great local marketing campaign. Can we use it somewhere else? And again, I think it's a two-way street. If it's a strong relationship, you learn both ways. And sometimes they can say, no, you can't do it because of 1, 2, 3. So I don't see it as an obstacle to the way we do business over here. But maybe in other cases, it might be. And I go back to the relationship. If you have a strong relationship, and as you mentioned, Andy, the terminology, franchisor, franchisee, it's a partnership. So if you have a strong partnership, then everything can work.
Look, I tend to agree. It's all about communication, and I think the more that a franchisee does to a business, I think a franchisor will be foolish not to jump on the opportunity and try and apply it elsewhere and fuel it in the right fashion as well. On the same topic, if I may, Nader, your take on this.
Okay. I think there are two words, both starting with an R, respect and relevance. If there is mutual respect between the partners, franchisees, franchisors, and they both understand that on all good faith and they want the benefit of the brand, and then that they're going to talk about anything that's relevant to the market and the brand, then you have a chance, to push things forward. I'll note two examples, if you don't mind. The first one is, since Andy brought McDonald's as an example. McDonald's, I've been consuming it for the last 50 years because I'm 50. So it was always buns. Big Mac, it's a bun with something in the middle. And then in the late 90s, if my memory is not deceiving me, they launched the Mac Arabia. Well, I'm sorry, Mac Arabia has nothing to do with the US. It has nothing to do with the buns. It has nothing to do with the McDonald's normal course of action. It must have been due to respect and relevance to the market. So they spoke to somebody in an Arab market who actually managed to get the point across and show the relevance, and then they have the Mac Arabia. That's one example. Another example, I represent, again, Subway in Egypt, and there are Subway representatives here. Hello, guys. So we were told that there is no store of Subway, full Subway, with the baking unit, less than X number of meters. We managed to create a store in Egypt, full, operational, with the baking unit in less than half that size. So 18 square meters.
Horizontally, or how did you do that?
Say again?
Horizontally.
No. So we did it in 18 square meters. We took their permission. We showed them how we're going to do it. And they knew that it could be a success or a failure. And then they came and visited us and saw the results. And it turns out it's something that we can replicate. So respect and relevance will be the cornerstones of how you can survive in a market that's changing, because you can't stop the market, as Tapan said, but you can evolve and beat the market if you're relevant and you look at the data in the right way.
2 more hours, revenue and results.
I mean, just to add to Nader also, we're in discussions with a new brand, and one of the first things they said, you know, the store should be X square meters, that's it. And we're trying to convince them, but then when they visited the market, we sat with them, they were convinced, and they saw it, and they decided, you know what, if you can do it in half and everything works, then. So I think, again, it's about the communication. And I think initially, I mean, for them, it's always about brand. This is ours, we own it. We need to make sure the image is right. But then when you sit with them and tell them, we're the local market experts, we can help you sort of develop that, it would always work. So good to hear about the Subway Egypt thing.
I think genuinely there's a learning for everyone. And what you have done by shrinking the space, I think that's a business model for a lot of people moving forward, which directly impacts our discussion today on a rent perspective. Because basically a smaller unit, you pay less rent, and there is more, hopefully, bottom line that's flowing through. 2 more questions. I'm cautious of time. We have 8 minutes left, and I would like to ask some questions to the floor as well. I would like to hear any questions from the floor before we conclude. But before we do that, we're talking about money making and translating a business into a commercial entity globally. So what are the 3 or 4 things in your set of eyes that actually impact a business, knowing what's happening around the globe today, knowing the logistical nightmare challenges that we have, the cost of transferring food items around the globe, the scarcity of certain items as well. So if I can just quickly go around the floor, top 4 that actually impact the business. So for our listeners today, to say these are the points that will impact your P&L directly, day in, day out. Tapan.
I'll take one at least. I'll talk about one. Product. Your product has got to be top-notch if you want to travel the world with your concept. So and when I say top-notch, it should tick all the boxes in terms of quality, in terms of taste, in terms of affinity with global cultures. Then it'll travel well. The other thing is have signature products. For example, we have the special garlic sauce, and Papa John's customers, they just love this. There's a strong, big cult following this special garlic sauce that we have. And in some restaurants, God forbid, if due to logistical reasons, if they are out of garlic sauce, the kind of anger we face from customers, unbelievable. So such signature products sometimes help you with your traveling.
Thank you. Sharif?
I'll just say 4 words. Number 1 is being consistent, starting from the product definitely, but in everything you do. After that is innovation. And then after that is data, data, data. We keep looking in our data. And then be relevant to your markets.
Thank you. Spot on. Nader?
You have to be a fan of your own brand and listen well to those loyal customers, but also listen to the critiques of those who don't like you, why they don't like you, and what would make them like you. And then go back to the holy book, relevance, data, good product, consistency. All of these are like must-dos. But I think if there's one advice for a brand to travel well, before you set foot in that market, please do your research. And we've done that with our beloved brand, Kulcha King. For whomever of you who haven't tried it, please do. It's great. So Kulcha King, when we launched it in Saudi, we had nobody to ping pong with. This is our brand. We don't have a franchisor to advise us or to guide us. So how are we going to take a brand that was born and flourished in the UAE, where there is a big demography of Indian cuisine culture, to a country that's mostly dominated by Arabs? How are we going to do that? And it took us a while, to understand, and we had to adapt a lot our product to suit the Saudi taste. And alhamdulillah, We've been live now for, this is the 11th week, and there's not a single week that was close to the prior week. It's always 30-40% higher.
Thank you. George?
So at Nando's, we have been in a relationship with our franchisor. That marriage has lasted 20 years. So I would look at it as if your starting point is shared values. If you share the same values and the same passion, then that's the starting point. Consistency, if you're bringing it into a market, what is the relevance? Is there a market gap that you're addressing? Or are you enhancing your product and offering is enhancing what is currently available? That's critical. And then obviously your team and the trust coefficient. And if you have a great team who understands the market and you have the data and the research, never enter a market on vanity. If you aren't making money from day one, or if you don't know your critical mass, at what point will you start making money? Then it's a bad start. There's no chance in hell. You'll have to be on course correction from day one. So please do your research, understand your cause, understand the challenges of rolling into a market. What are you trying to, which gap are you trying to fill? What are you trying to improve? And then relevance, consistency, data, supply chain, the team, and above all, the trust between the partners. If you have the shared values, if you have the same passion, you can't fail.
Thank you, George. Andy?
Everything they said, and then maybe aligned to more of my current role, a bit of consultancy speak. Two things. One, I would say the value proposition. So it encompasses all of those elements about food and product, but being clear, what is the value proposition that is going to drive the customer to come and actually engage and stick, not just the product on the first time, but everything else. And the second thing is, I would say, there's an absolute critical requirement for the alignment between investors and operators. Right? If it's not clear to the investors going in what the real time frame for value creation is, it can create a lot of unnecessary stress. Typically, depending on the investor side of the fence, there's an expectation a restaurant will pay everything back in 3 years, which is, if it's a big brick and mortar thing, it's possible, but it puts a lot of pressure on the initial period, where in fact, if the restaurant's being set up at a chain level for success, there's a much longer term. So if those two things aren't aligned at the beginning, it can cause a lot of pain. But if they are, that's good.
Clearly, Andy's wearing his advisory hat. 3 years, return on investment. Okay. Melhem?
Nothing to be added, so they've said it all. It's, I think just one comment here. It's how to present your product, how do you communicate into new markets, how to get it to consumers. Each market is different, and I agree with everything they've said.
Thank you very much. Look, if we do have any landlords in the room, I think we might have missed you. Location is equally as important, but what I'm very happy to hear is that it's not the only decisive thing that we look at when we're looking at opening a new business, no matter where we are. Because we greatly believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we create destinations as well if we have the right concept, with the right business model, with the right footfall and so forth. That brings me to my end of the questions. I didn't do very well probing today because I have a professional bunch next to me here. Sadly, I tried, but I didn't go very far. But the day is only young, so brace yourself if you're coming on stage with me next. But before we do that, we have a minute. Any questions from the floor? We have lots of questions. Amazing. Amazing. Can we get some mics to these guys?
Great panel, first of all. You did a great job, I must say, and we did get intrigued by a lot of answers that came through. My name is Kapil Malhotra. I'm the Managing Director of Total Solutions Group. One thing that I wanted to put across to the panel here is that when you travel the globe with your brand, there's always a customer acquisition strategy and a customer feedback that you need to get in terms of how to engage with them further. Is there anything unique that you've been able to do consistently and scale it across countries that you think has worked, and would you like to share it with us?
I take it that we could as operators. But I think you're 100% right. I think entering a market, be it a POS, be it customer acquisition, I think it's all in the data that we've kind of briefly touched on. But obviously, due to the time scale, we can't go deep in every silo. But data will cover all of that. So thank you for the question. Who else is? We have some questions down this side.
Morning, guys. Thank you for your insights. Greg, the founder of Food People in Dubai. You mentioned a lot of R's in there and a lot of legal framework. I think the two R's that I would like to discuss are recruitment, but more importantly, retention. I think if companies are going through expansion, recruitment is definitely a challenge, but the ones that have already gone through the expansion, the toughest thing for them right now is retaining the people that have worked so hard to get on board. The UAE labour law is changing, and by February, every single company needs to change their contracts to ensure that they're down to the 2-year deal. I saw a contract yesterday that said if the person left within 2 years, they would be fined or charged for all of the onboarding costs and training costs that it took to get them on board and to get them up to speed. And I spoke to the business, and they said, oh, that's our retention tool. I don't understand that. For me, that's basically pushing people away and saying, we're going to handcuff you. And it was almost like reading a Saudi contract when we had a Karmas many years ago. So my question is what retention tools are you guys working with? And which ones have you found to be a success? Because every conversation I have at the moment with CEOs and MDs is about retention. So I'd like to kind of get your insights in terms of what you think works from a retention tool.
I need one answer. We're out of time. So one quick answer. So go ahead, Sharif.
I think the one very short answer is treat your employees better than you treat your customers. And this is what will make them stay with you forever.
Thanks, Sharif. George, Joseph, sorry.
Hello, everyone. Joseph from the Radisson Hotel Group. In a recent convention like this one, I heard a very nice, interesting comment from the panelists. It basically said that 80% of franchised businesses or franchise brands succeed, and 80% of, let's say, homegrown concepts fail. What are your views on that? Do you agree?
Can we boo him, please? Boo. One answer?
Scale. I think that those independents, if they aren't able to find the support at the point of inflection where they want to grow, they run out of time and money and enthusiasm, whereas big events, big brands have unlimited resources to be able to keep kind of adding energy and money and stuff to them. So I think the bigger you are, the easier it is, essentially.
Thanks, Andy. You've been amazing. Thank you for all the questions. Sorry, we're out of time, but the day is young, so we have lots of time, so stick around. Amazing panel. Please put your hands together and thank them on my behalf as well. Thank you, guys. Well done.